podcast is brought to you by Nayax Coinbridge. Before we get started, it may be useful for me to explain how I first came across Coinbridge. I had arrived at a loyalty conference in London and I was late and in need of a cup of tea. I met someone at the tea counter who explained to me that she worked for a company who had developed a technology that would allow instant redemption of any loyalty points at the point of sale. I was tired and pre-tea grumpy, and my immediate response, to my shame, was that I've heard it all before and it will not work. But she convinced me to have a meeting with Guy Rosenhuys, who explained how the technology had cracked how to use the MasterCard network to complete a transaction without all the costs that were previously associated with prepaid virtual cards. A total game changer. And I'm truly sorry for my grumpy response that morning. So if you'd like to hear more about Coinbridge, please drop me a line. In the meantime, here are a few extracts of the discussion to come.
But I must admit, I want to start right at the beginning and say Byron Sharp clearly showed his lack of understanding of the industry. Right? I'd be embarrassed to put something like that out there because what he's picked on is a tiny scenario. Yeah, of course, everyone knows rewarding people already maxed out isn't going to work, but you'd be an idiot to do a program like that.
The margin is extraordinary. So it's not, and they managed to maintain margins despite the fact they were growing substantially, which in any business would be considered to be quite a good thing. Your margins doubling, and you're a large grocer. Explain that.
Hi, I'm Ian Pringle, and this is the Loyalty Podcast from Loyalty Wired, where we help you make the most of your loyalty strategies by listening to us talk about what we like to talk about most, which is loyalty and loyalty programs. The last 6 months has seen a closure of a number of long-term loyalty programs, and authors like Byron Sharp have also argued the case that loyalty does not work. So in the spirit of a TV drama, I've gathered a number of expert witnesses to explore the issues and argue the case for the defence backed by evidence. So please could I introduce our star witnesses for today, Thomas Hill from Hyperfinity. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Your Honour. How are you doing?
Thank you. And Jessie Stuart from Hyperfinity too. Hi, Jessie.
Hi, Ian.
Nice to see you. And Dicken, New World Loyalty and previously head of customer engagement operations and insight at Barclays UK. Hi, Dicken.
Hello.
And our very own Phil Gunter, founder and CEO of New World Loyalty. Hi, Phil.
Hello, Ian.
Hi. So just to get us started tonight, can I call my first witness? Probably not for the first time, Phil. Phil Gunter. Phil, for the benefit of the court, could you please give us an introduction to yourself and your experience in this matter?
Sure. Well, my history in loyalty goes back a long way. The interesting things, I guess, are building and managing Virgin's program in Australia for many years, and I can give examples from that. Before that, I ran American Express's program here in Australia, and the last 10 years, as you mentioned, New World Loyalty, working with all sorts of clients, all sorts of industries all around the world, and that's given us so many insights that we can bring to this.
And so, in the spirit of what works and what doesn't work, I mean, if you want to put percentages on it, you've measured lots and many. And what's your view on does it work?
There's an awful lot of rubbish out there, right? No, but that is true. There's a lot of rubbish, right? But a well-designed and well-executed loyalty program can be brilliant. It can do things that most other marketing tools cannot do. It can bring all sorts of benefits, which we'll probably cover in the as we go. But it's not the right tool for everybody. But I must admit, I want to start right at the beginning and say Byron Sharp clearly showed his lack of understanding of the industry. Right? I'd be embarrassed to put something like that out there because what he's picked on is a tiny scenario. Yeah, but of course, like everyone knows, right? Rewarding people already maxed out isn't going to work, but you'd be an idiot to do a program like that. Whereas when you look at your business, look at what your business is, look at your customers, and design and execute for that, then it can be brilliant. So trashing the whole industry based on a scenario is just dumb.
And are there any scenarios where you've seen it absolutely nailed on work? You know, where you have seen it perform phenomenally well?
Of course. I'm totally biased, but the Velocity story is a very well known, very successful story. The objective, the background was a little airline had 30% market share, but only had 10% of the corporate share. They wanted to increase the share of the corporates, and all the research came back and said the number one reason the corporates aren't looking at you is because you don't have because of the competitors, Qantas's frequent flyer program. Number one reason. The number two reason was daylight. People thought it was network and stuff, but Virgin's network was absolutely good enough. It was the frequent flyer. They had a brilliant frequent flyer and they locked people in. So Virgin had to build a competitive frequent flyer to literally, that was the original intent, was to unlock their competitors' main customers. But in doing so, we did it in a way which brought a number of other benefits, which again I can give you over the call, and built $1 billion business. But it succeeded on nearly every front. You can just go through all the things it succeeded on. It's a total success story for a period. Like many other programs, eventually you've got to keep running them like a shark. But for a period, it was absolutely killing it. It doubled the share of the corporates. It delivered $1 billion of revenue. It was the number one distressed inventory channel. It brought the best data and insights. It was the number one marketing channel. So because a number of people signed up for that were opening their emails and all that sort of stuff. And the insights it was able to deliver as well, much better than anything else we could do across the business. It just nailed it on all things, but it was designed from the beginning to work.
Dicken, you're nodding your head there too.
Yeah, so I started off in the airline business actually. So I was with British Airways. There were plenty of examples of playing around with loyalty program mechanics to improve performance in that industry. We had a situation in the States where we'd lost quite a lot of market share because of competitor activity, and we pulled back about 16% on transatlantic routes. That's huge in the airline industry, right? Like vast amounts of money. Simply by trying to work out how to become more competitive in that space. I think that the example on topic that always comes to mind is working with a large retail bank in Australia, where we had quite a nice analytical opportunity. So we had a significant credit card portfolio, one of the biggest in the market, but you had to choose to be in that loyalty program. You had to pay to be part of it. And so therefore we had maybe 50% of customers were paying to be in it and 50% weren't, which gave us huge sampling opportunities to decide what like groups of customers and like behaviors look like that we could compare. And what had been happening is big changes in the credit card industry and the way it gets funded. And that organization was starting to talk about closing that program down. We got the message that was likely to happen. And we were asked to take a look at the analysis that had been done to demonstrate that this program really wasn't delivering. So we took a look at it, and it was basically just full of holes from the start. So first of all, the work had been done over 1 year of data. So obviously loyalty programs pay back over multiple years. And secondly, it was very, very interesting in one metric alone, which was, can you increase the amount of money people spend on their credit card? That was what they were trying to measure. And the answer was, yes, you could, but you might not be able to do that to the point where it really covers the costs of the program and makes it worthwhile doing. So we switched it around and said, well, that's in 1 year. So what's the payback over several years? And much more importantly, how retentive is it? So we've probably all of us here got several credit cards. It's very easy to get a new one. It's very easy to move your balance and so on. And the answer to that question, when we looked at this over multiple years, was perhaps 2 years more on the credit card portfolio because they were a member of the loyalty program than if they weren't, which is absolutely huge again. So it's very, very, very hard to keep people in a credit card portfolio. And the numbers changed so significantly that we were able to totally change the opinion of the program within that organization, and they kept it. And it still runs to this day. I think that's one of the key questions for this really is, what are you measuring for what purpose, and what are you expecting to get in return for your investment in loyalty? And if it's just about the increased sale opportunity from earning, you're looking at a very limited set of data, which I think sort of talks a bit to what Phil was talking about earlier.
But that's also a key kickoff into Tom and Jessie. So Tom and Jessie, do you want to introduce us to yourselves and what Hyperfinity do and your experience in this space?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. So Hyperfinity, so with the data science behind loyalty, really. So how do you optimize the offers, the program, the scheme to the individual to ultimately drive that incremental revenue that you want to see that return? So we're all about not auto-rewarding. I think you have base programs that you need to get right, that need to be brand aligned. But then it's around how you can target offers around that and then measure the success and prove it. And so when you asked the question earlier, does loyalty work? Obviously, yes. And we've proved it multiple times. And I think that's where Jessie comes in. I'll let her introduce herself now. But like Jessie, you've got lots of experience in measuring and proving how loyalty is successful and how we see it work.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So yeah, like Tom said, we've got quite a lot of experience across a wide variety of retailers, like FMCG heavy, and that's where we've really seen it definitely work, and it comes out in the measurement that you can see the results there. But generally, we've measured it a lot, and we can see that it works differently across different types of retailers and against different objectives too. So I think linking to what you were saying, Dicken, it's about how the business has defined the loyalty program, how they've designed it, and what they're trying to achieve with it. So if we use the FMCG example and relating to the How Brands Grow book, I know he makes the point in there that it's all about retention, not important. But for a retailer like a large FMCG, it really is important because they've got one shop a week. They want to try to win that big shop for each customer. And there's a lot of competition in that market. So it's how they can use a loyalty program to make sure that they're the forefront of the customer's mind and they're winning that big shop versus the competition. And then that's a really nice thing to measure because you can see then you've got a wide variety of customers that are shopping in different ways. You've maybe got some that are doing a top-up shop, some that come in really sporadically, but then some that are doing the big shop. And it's really nice to see that when the loyalty programs are introduced, you can see within the measurement results that you're then growing the spend, you're seeing that retention benefit, and the frequency is growing because the customers are coming back every week to do their big shop where they weren't before.
The other thing, Jessie, is Byron Sharp, we don't go on about him all the time, but one of he does introduce a clear measure where he says, in order to measure the effectiveness of loyalty, you need to have before and after, you need to measure over a long period, and you need to have survived at least 2 changes in the market that were beyond loyalty. And the way I love the way that you guys have done it is that you're using credit card token in order to measure before and after. So can you talk us through that approach and how that fits to his definition of how to measure what works?
Yeah, definitely. So I agree with bits of what you said. So you need a before and after. There are things you can do without a before, but it's a lot more valid if you've got a before and after period. But I think what he's missed is what we find really important is to use the actual what the customer's doing behaviour, what they were doing within their weekly shop or within their frequency of visit within the retailer before, and what they were doing after. So like you said, Ian, where we can try and use a credit card token. It depends on how the business is set up as to what level of customer data you've got, but as close to, I know that this data is relating to this customer and this is how they were behaving before and after the loyalty program. So however we can get to that, dependent on the retailer. And then we know, obviously, at a customer level when the customer started to use the loyalty scheme, so when they're first engaged with it. So you can see before they were engaging, how were they performing, how were they shopping, what were they buying, what types of things were they buying. And you can see when they started to engage with the loyalty scheme and then how did that change afterwards. So what did they go on to do? And it actually depends on the business as to how long the before and after needs to be to get a really valid measurement. Because if you're a type of business that customers are shopping every day, you don't need that long of a before. If they're a frequent shopper, you can get the gist of what they were doing before the loyalty scheme, and you can really quickly see how the loyalty scheme has impacted that. Even if it's just getting them to add an extra item to their basket, you'll see that change. Whether you see that they were doing a bi-weekly shop and now they're doing a weekly shop, you can identify that really quickly. For other retailers that have got a lot lower frequency of visit, maybe fashion or something like that, that they're not encouraging a weekly shop, but maybe a monthly shop or a quarterly shop, you need a relative amount of pre-period. But again, once you've got a similar amount of post behaviour, so rather than like a 2-year period, we're talking more like a 3-month, 6-month period, you can get a really good read of how the customer's behaviour has changed.
Unless you're me with fashion, Jessie, where I'm a 2-year shop man myself.
So we need a while for you, Ian. But then that's why it's really good, because when you're measuring it for all of the customers, you can get different reads for different types of customer behaviour too. So we might be able to say, well, we've got the read already for the customers that are shopping every day. You need to wait longer to get a valid measurement for this type of customer. But then once you've got them all, you can compare the impacts of the incremental spend for different types of customers too. So it really helps to identify where it's working and where it's not.
So that's really important thing. So we talk a lot about micro segments. So as Jessie's just described, we break down the customers based on that tokenized data for the pre-period into micro segments. So how loyal am I? How regular am I? How much am I spending with you? But then what am I spending it on? And how does that describe me? And when you know that, then you know where your loyalty program's working and not working. And I think we've all probably had the experience is that mid-loyal group of customers where you get your most incremental spend. your real VIP loyal advocates are always shopping your brand will do so anyway, whether there's a loyalty scheme or not. You might be able to get a little bit more there, but that's not where your incrementality tends to come from. It's in that middle set. But then what you really can understand is, well, where do I want to give away additional incremental reward? Where am I going to boost offers? Where am I going to boost deals? Where am I going to try and encourage more loyalty? Because again, I think that the argument around new versus existing that Jessie spoke about, very much within your existing, there are a group of non-loyals in there that you want to make loyal. And they are almost new customers in a way. And it's how you engender loyalty and get the right things in front of them and target that. So I think those micro segments around tokenized data, matching them up to your loyalty program then to understand the pre and the post is how we measure, but then how we go on to target, so the right offers and a level of spend afterwards.
But if I could pick you up there, Tom, you don't necessarily need to have a loyalty program to use this to measure loyalty, in fact, which is what, again, because, you know, one of the retailers you work for, we won't name names, but they famously didn't have a loyalty program for a very long time, which means that you can still measure loyalty, you just don't know their names and addresses.
Yeah, and engagement, exactly that. Loyalty schemes, if you like, in terms of what they are and how they work, don't have to necessarily be an app or a card that you scan. Ultimately, it's your core proposition in how you communicate with customers. We work with other retailers that have customer data, but don't necessarily have a loyalty scheme. But ultimately, if every person is identifiable to you, i.e. they register an account to interact with your proposition, that in essence is a loyalty scheme. That is loyalty. How you leverage that data to target offers, target deals at the right time to make sure that you're winning that share is really important. And I think when we're talking about where loyalty works, and Jessie sort of alluded to this, FMCG supermarkets is a key one, right? So the space race is done, certainly in the UK. Aldi and Lidl are still doing it, but you can't lay down too many more new stores because ultimately you're not going to get any more sales for it. That won't make you any money. So when you've done that, how do you then increase your sales? How do you increase your like for likes? The only way you can do that is through more spend from your existing customers, because everybody shops in Tesco, right? There's not that many new customers to Tesco in the UK, that's for sure. So how do you ultimately drive loyalty and increased spend? You've got to have an engaging program. And the other thing about retailers like that, they are data-rich businesses and they measure and understand this constantly, and they will understand what it's doing. It is a massive cost. So we're in with finance constantly going, that's a big negative number on my P&L. Where's the positive number? And that's our job to go, here it is, and here how much it's making, this is why it's worth it. So I think where there's discretionary purchases or choice in a saturated market, that's where loyalty really, really works. I like McDonald's, actually. So quick serve restaurants and QSR is really good for loyalty right now because it's discretionary. Cinema's similar, it's discretionary, right? And at a time when there's been kind of cost price increases, inflationary pressure, winning that discretionary spend from consumers is really hard. And you do that through really carefully targeted deals through loyalty. And I think that's where it really works and really works well. So I'm sort of interested to watch the McDonald's play out a little bit more because it is the sort of thing where you don't sometimes know you want a McDonald's. I mean, potentially nobody ever wants a McDonald's, but you don't sometimes know you want one until you get something which encourages you to do it. And certainly around breakfast, certainly around coffees, things like that. There's a big competitive market in that space. And just nudging people into, actually, I just took the kids to McDonald's at the weekend through to I'm actually now just adding a breakfast mission. We talk a lot about missions and increasing mission breadth for retailers. But how do I include a breakfast mission through loyalty? That's where it works. So definitely where it's discretionary.
All of the language you're using, Tom, is the language of Byron Sharp, right? We're not idiots. We've been doing this for years. And again, he's just used language and an argument that we've known about for years. We just use different language to describe it.
I think the problem, though, is so pre-post, which we've spoken a bit about, or in that slightly rare example on the program, off the program type stuff. That's the easy bit because you know what was going on before and you know what's happening afterwards. The problem is how you continue to demonstrate this value. And that's where almost all of the coalition loyalty programs, as an example, have collapsed because it's very, very hard to continuously prove that you're putting money in through the front of the business. And it's particularly difficult, I think, because we tend to be working in the world of marketing, and at the top table, marketing quite often isn't at the top table at all, right? Most CMOs don't sit on the board of an organization. Most retail leaders, so the people that are responsible for stores and inventory and merchandising stuff, they do. And so they've all got a voice there. Everybody's trying to pitch for the value that's being generated by the business, and the people aren't really being represented there are marketing. So I think the challenge is much more 2 years down, 3 years down the line, how you're continually pitching in and demonstrating that you're able to deliver value. Any thoughts on how you make sure that happens?
Again, going back to the micropayments piece, Tom, that's where we've seen it work very well recently, Phil, isn't it? Where we've taken a retailer over a long period who've had a loyalty program that's been very successful in cashback. And what they've done is taken those micro segments, measured where the redemption benefit has been. And again, speaking to the redemption benefit, we were seeing more than 50% of the benefit of the uplift of the program coming with customers that were getting vouchers worth less than £1. So it's those very low value customers, nudging them to do something else, measuring them over the long term. But you've got to keep moving. You've got to keep signing these customers up, which again, Tom, what you were saying about McDonald's, they're really good at signing you up. They're really good at getting your first time in, first time join, nudge you to do something. Because again, they're not aiming at that very top segment of customers. Well, they know that the benefit is getting that small customer to come in another time. And measuring that micro to micro, especially with this discount retailer, was saying, actually, I'm going to measure whoever, when they redeem, I'm going to measure against people who didn't come in at the same time, and absolutely like for like type customer groups to see what the uplift was. And if you can absolutely prove that, then you're cooking on gas.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways that are obviously interesting or natural. So for marketing, it's always about control groups, isn't it? And how we measure most things. It's at the point of measurement. Can you take a really good control group? So when we were talking about the tokenized card data and the pre to post movement, that's obviously at the point of starting the loyalty scheme, which is actually easier. You can say for the customers that have engaged versus customers that haven't at the same time, that look similar in the pre-period, how do they go on to perform? And again, for particular targeted offers, it's quite nice because you can take actual holdouts at that point. So you don't have to give everyone in the designated segment that offer that you might be targeting. You could say, I know you're part of the loyalty scheme and you look like these people, but I'm not going to target you with a particular offer. I'm going to target everyone else. And then how does that uplift differ? Which again is a nice way to continually prove the benefit that you're getting from having a loyalty scheme. But it's almost the offer within the loyalty scheme at that point. But what is quite nice over time for loyalty overall, so Dicken, when you were saying about how do you prove it year on year, is like what we like to do is have a look at where the customers have moved to in terms of the micro segments. So where were you? Did you come in as a new customer, and have you now become a high loyal customer as a result of being part of the loyalty scheme? Year on year, we had the loyalty scheme this year. We didn't have it last year. What did our natural customer movements look like between segments? And what do they look like now because we've got the loyalty scheme? And I think that's where loyalty is really important is, yeah, we want to keep our high loyals loyal, and we want to make sure we're getting new customers in. But where it's really powerful is once I've got a new customer in, how do I take them on that journey to become a high loyal customer? How do I make sure I keep retaining them? I think that's where it's nice to see that even if it's not what a marketer would define as traditional measurement, having a look at how the customers are moving between segments is a really nice way to prove the value.
And moving down as well as up, because they do. Yeah.
And hopefully just moving down less is nice. So if you're trying to have a loyalty scheme in a saturated market like FMCG, your actual primary goal is to try and steal as many customers from your competitors as you can. So retaining is important. So the customers you've already got, you want them to keep spending. Because that will actually still grow your business because they're now not going to the other supermarket down the road, and you're taking that market share from a competitor.
Yeah, we've just done some work in the DIY space, and it was very much a case of holding on to your loyal trade, regular customers is much more important than driving new, because they are very promiscuous in terms of looking for just where they can get the cheapest materials.
And did that show a positive return on investment there as well, Tom?
Yes, absolutely, and that's where the focused attention in terms of the targeting as to where you want to increment any offers should be better to be focused at loyal people and protecting them, not just growing people who are less loyal.
The key to a lot of this, though, is understanding what the business is, what the program's trying to do, and measuring appropriately. Right? So a lot of this focus is on like FMCG and things like that. I was lucky enough where I was working with a female apparel that had a program that had a certain set of benefits that we were able to turn some of them off for a period of time, wait a while, and turn them back on and just watch. Right. So this isn't like top end, but this is the average transaction was about $120. But one of the key benefits was if you spend $300, then you would get a voucher. Right. So it's quite a simple thing, but we turned it off for a period, boom, and just waited. And the graph, and then we switched it back on, and the graph of the two things, that the average transaction value and the time to next transaction, both of them were like massive impacts for obvious reasons, right? There's a real incentive. People in the shop, they kind of wanted to buy stuff. It was an incentive to buy up. If you got two things, you could quite easily get over the $300, and it did, right? And then secondly, because you got that voucher and it was a time bang voucher, then they were coming in, and there we measured it a while before, a while during, and a while afterwards, and it was really, really obvious. Now that wouldn't work with FMCG, but it worked brilliantly in apparel.
But the other thing I'd say, and this is a conversation we've had, Tom, Jessie, before, is, and this is a phrase I heard in the city, but it's very, very relevant for loyalty, is don't be obsessed with weighing the pig. Okay, you weigh the pig once. If you're a farmer, you don't weigh the pig every week, right? You don't weigh the pig every day. And I think particularly in retail, we're almost guilty of the opposite of what Byron Sharp's doing, where we weigh the pig all the time. And funnily enough, the pig doesn't change weight. In fact, worryingly, the pig changes weight marginally every day, right? And it's a waste of time. You need to weigh the pig once or twice and then get on with the day-to-day management of maximizing your promotions, maximizing your engagement, making sure that the customers are redeeming, and all the operational stuff that goes with a loyalty program. But don't weigh the pig again and again and again. Has anyone got experience in that space?
So I'll give you an extreme example where we weighed it once. And that, again, it was at Virgin, but I engaged, I was asked by one of the main universities down here to sponsor a PhD study, right? So it's 5 years, right? 5 years, and it was fascinating intellectually, right? Because the whole department was like supporting this thing, and they used the European supercomputers because the amount of data was so huge that they used for this thing. And long story short, the whole time I'm a little bit nervous. Right? I was a little bit nervous, right? Because you just didn't know. Right? I was confident, but you just didn't know. And at the end of it, it literally spat out an answer which said, for every dollar that was invested in rewards, it increased the yield by just over 2. Right? And that's like a magic. In the industry, that's like the magic number. So of the rewards you're giving away, what does it really deliver to you? And in an airline environment, when it is pretty much like additional revenue is pretty much like 90% margin, right? Then that was fantastic. But like I say, I had to wait a long time.
I think the problem is with all of this, though, is so you measure it. Who cares about what you're measuring? Who's interested in that, right? So we all live in the world of loyalty and, marketing. So for us to see all the little incremental bits of value that add up to something quite substantial, in the way we're talking about with kind of grocery is fairly obvious to us. But your programs aren't in trouble because of the marketing department. They're always, on top of all this stuff. I think it's more, how do you engage the wider business? So I've got various examples of doing that. So I used to work at dunnhumby. The Tesco program there delivered enormous amounts of incremental margin that was quite measurable, as an example. And that wasn't just on the back of their ability to market in the sort of ways that we're talking about here. So lots of very specific targeted marketing. It was also the fact that all of that intelligence was doing an awful lot to the back end. So we were doing better deals. We were putting different products in different supermarkets depending on the local demand for those products. We're introducing high margin ranges and those sorts of things. And for a while there, they were the only grocer in the world capable of producing something like 7% of net margin. 3% was a pretty good margin for the rest of grocery. Tesco were doing that and growing substantially at the same time.
But Dicken, if I could pick you up there, when I was on an interview with Byron Sharp, and his defence to that was Tesco was going to grow anyway. Tesco was building lots of stores, and you're saying absolutely it's not. It was about data as well.
Well, so you can, and lots of companies have grown substantially on the back of very heavy investment, which is obviously going to have to be paid back at some point. I'd ask him to explain the margin.
So you're growing and making more money, which is a good point, right?
The margin is extraordinary. So it's not, and they managed to maintain margins despite the fact they were growing substantially, which in any business would be considered to be quite a good thing. Your margins doubling, and you're a large grocer, explain that. And then I think the other thing he'd need to explain is that wasn't true for Tesco before they launched their loyalty program. The loyalty program was a huge game changer for them. So they used to spend twice as much money as Sainsbury's in advertising prior to launching their program. And for years and years and years, they've been doing that. And they hadn't got anywhere close to taking Sainsbury's on as number one in the market. Within a year of launching their loyalty program, they were the biggest grocery retailer in the UK. And what they then went on to do, which is take that model into Europe and grow substantially in that way, was all built on their ability to really understand the customer, respond to the customer effectively. And the other thing that Byron Sharp would need to explain, I don't know idea who he is, but I've read this book. But the other thing he would need to explain is the value of the redemption mechanism. So Tesco still offer 1% on spend of their spend. Now, why do they do that? Because every other loyalty program you care to mention has steadily reduced the amount of value in their currency. So Nectar is now about 0.5% of spend within supermarkets. Why have they done that? Because if you do it right, all of that money comes back in through the front door, and all of it loads up that average value of your basket. We know a lot of people spend that money on extra things they wouldn't have bought otherwise, or they support a bigger basket because they can. They tend to spend more. So I just don't. It just all seems terribly empty as a comment. You should spend all of your money on acquisition. And by the way, super easy to spend money on acquisition. So I'm working with a bunch of clients in the sort of specifically in acquiring customers through digital channels for digital experiences at the moment. Everybody is buying traffic like it's going out of fashion at the moment, and pushing up the cost of doing that substantially because it's the only lever they've got to pull. We're just going to throw more and more money into that, and it's less and less efficient the more you spend on it. So this idea that all you've got to do really is go out to market and just attract lots of new customers is like, it doesn't make any sense either. So although with Phil's first comment in this conversation, there's an awful lot of stuff out there that was very badly designed, shouldn't have been put in place in the first place in industries that can't really take so much value out of it and that sort of thing.
And I definitely agree with that. I mean, we're in a market where if we were car manufacturers, there's some cars out there that can go 200 miles an hour, and there's some cars out there that don't have any wheels and don't have a steering wheel and don't have. I mean, you could stretch the analogy as far as you like. But there's lots of loyalty programs I will not defend, and I've spent time in boardrooms defending, and I shouldn't have been there. I should have been defending something else or doing something else because it was a waste of breath, and I knew myself it didn't work.
I think Dicken's point then, Ian's a real key one. So you like let's keep the metaphors and analogies going. So cars and pigs, whatever we're going for, it's got to be the right pig, right? We've all agreed with that. Let's get the right pig in. Too many people put the wrong pig in. Yeah, and it doesn't work. You give away way too much. And the worst thing you can do is put in a program where you're giving away, you're auto-rewarding. It's a massive cost and it's not a good thing to do. I mean, that happens. So you've got to get your pig right. Okay, when you're happy with that pig, weigh it and then leave it. Then it is all about, as Jessie said, we're now into campaigns. So you've got your pig. That's your core pig. What are we going to do on top of that pig? We're going to put in targeted offers, targeted solutions, which in essence are looking to drive up that loyalty in the right way. And then you can do test and control. So that ongoing measurement, Dicken, is very much around when we now have the loyalty program that we've weighed once. We might weigh it twice. To Jessie's point earlier, you can start to do things interestingly year on year, so maybe even 3 times. But once we're happy with it, don't see it as a cost, see it as an asset, and then build upon it. The second bit though, why is it an asset? It's not just about sales, okay? You talked about Dunnhumby there, Dicken. How you optimize, and I know Byron Sharp talks about this, right? Having the product available to customers is critical, right? Just focus on that. Well, how do you do that? Data. Making sure you've got the right product in the right stores so the customer can buy what they want was all done from the insight from loyalty data. How you make sure that's growing your sales, that's growing your revenue, that's doing the exact things that Byron Sharp talked about. But what it does is it puts loyalty data as an asset, an insight asset to optimize retail decisions. Right price, first and importantly, understanding price sensitivity, where it matters to be competitive, the right range of merch. So what range you put in what stores is about getting the right product to the consumer. That all comes from your data asset that's created from loyalty. Don't overlook that. And then the big movement now, which is a lot of people are doing, is why they're getting into loyalty, is both media. So marketing is becoming media, and monetization. So understanding customer data as an asset. Retail media is driving massive income streams now, and revenue to businesses through targeting. So if you've got a lot of footfall to your business, and now you've got a lot of customer data to understand who that footfall is, then you can monetize that. Endemic and non-endemic advertising for people who want to speak to your customers, either via your assets, your app, your website, or even offsite now. So integrations with ITVX, the likes of B&Q, Nectar are doing very much around, home movers, DIY people, you want to speak to them, or we can give you that access to that audiences via media channels now. So it's a lot broader than just loyalty now, and people need to realize that. And so, but I think that key point, Dicken, is a massive one. All the principles that Byron Sharp talks about around making sure your product is there for people to buy is done and optimized through the data that you get through loyalty and the insight you get from that.
But also, to sort of add to that, though, what company isn't trying to improve availability?
Yeah, it's mad.
So it's a glib thing to say. You should be spending all your time and effort getting stuff on shelves.
Well, thanks for that.
Yeah, but why? Who's not doing that? But then also, I think you got to then also say, so is there any purpose in any marketing? If it's all about availability, why do any of it? So
that's a really good point, Dicken. And just a final one, the bit that I would take in, the final piece of evidence I would take in would be, so we say loyalty doesn't work. And to your point about targeted communications, Tom, which brings us on to Phil, just please talk us through status runs, right? If loyalty doesn't work, then why does a status run exist?
No, exactly. So it's related to, obviously, to the airline industry, but at the end of the calendar year, you can actually see people. There's I was a banker for 10 years. During that time, it was a common statement that I need to go and basically do a status run. I need to do a status run to New Zealand. I need to do a status run to Singapore. And it was totally acceptable. So there was people literally creating meetings overseas so they can go and do their trip and either attain or more usually retain their status. And you can see people throughout the year actively making a choice of who they fly with and really willingly to pay more.
And who would you rather negotiate with, procurement or someone who wants to go to Singapore to top up their things? And it absolutely happens. It's a real thing. I've seen it in the data, and it's nailed on evidence that loyalty works. Well, on that final thing, I'd just like to say thank you for our key witnesses today. So thank you very much, Jessie. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, no worries, Ian. It's been great to chat.
And thanks, John. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Ian.
And thanks, Dicken.
thank you.
And thanks, Phil.
Always a pleasure.
And thank you for listening. And if you like this podcast, please like, share, or comment on LinkedIn using this hashtag, The Loyalty Podcast. And we'll look forward to your company again soon. Thank you, and goodbye.